Well, hello everyone, welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski. I'll be your host for today. We're starting a little bit later than planned, but as to those tuning in who've been with us for a while will know that expeditions are unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen in the field. So flexibility is one of the best skills you can have as a future scientist, a future explorer, conservationist. Flexibility is a pretty important quality to have. Well, this is our space month, so we've had a lot of space exploration events and way more to come as the month continues. Scientists, engineers, astronauts joining us. So head to exploringbytheseat.com. You can find all the events we have coming up, and then you can come and join us. Today is special for three really big reasons. One, we're going live in the field, which is one of our favorite things to do here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. Two, we're doing it with my pal, Joe Cutler, who's one of my favorite people in the world, and I love getting time to hang out with him. And three, this will be our first event ever from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So three really cool things happening, coming together for this event. We're going to go live to the Lufira River in the DRC and join Joe. He is joining us from the side of the river, right close to where they're camping for the evening. Joe is pretty familiar here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. He's joined us on river expeditions, tide pooling adventures in California, places like Gabon, Mongolia, Zambia, Angola. Joe's joined us from a lot of really, really cool places. So heck, let's add one more to the list and get him here from the DRC. Hey, Joe, how are you?
Hey, Joe, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. It's great to see you. It's getting a little harder to see you under all the beard and hair growth from your time in the field. You've been going nonstop.
Oh, yeah, it's been a busy year. I'm approaching 3,500 kilometers surveyed this year and 7 months in the field. So the beard goes to show and probably how dirty and raggedy I look. But we're still pushing on. This will be my final expedition of the year. And as you said, it's an important one here in the DRC on the Lufira River, which is one of the headwaters, one of the sources of the Congo River system. So it's my first time to explore the Congo, first time for me in the DRC, and it's been a really interesting and challenging trip thus far.
Yeah. All right. Well, Joe, I'm going to make you a big screen. Let's take a little look of the surroundings. Let's see you're right on the bank of the river. I can hear some of your campmates in the background. Let's take a little look. Let's set the stage.
Yeah. So behind me here, you can see the Lufira River. Down there at the bottom of this set of rapids, there's a fisherman in his dugout canoe. And we are just downstream of two hydropower dams, which separate the upper Lufira from the lower Lufira. And we're going to be entering a stretch of river with a lot of rapids coming up. So we're going to be switching from our canoes into our inflatable boats tomorrow. And I'm going to swing around here. Kadila, say hello.
Hello.
This is Kadila, our camp manager. He's been busy cooking all the food, making sure we stay fed. There's Kevius.
Hello.
And Dominic.
Hello.
Great to have you with us.
Yeah, so these are our camp crew. They're also our canoe captains. So these guys have been doing a lot of work on the river thus far. We've got a park guard here.
Hi. Bonsoir. Wow. Cheers. Okay, cheers.
Awesome.
And swinging around a bit here, you can see we've got some tents set up. We've got our trailer with our canoes. We've got our 2 land cruisers, which are getting beat up out here on the rough roads of the DRC. We've got some equipment scattered about, and this is our kitchen setup here. So we've got food in all these yellow capsize containers. We've got a nice table where we've got our coffee and tea and peanut butter and all the other luxuries. And well, let me actually point back. So the landscape here is mostly Miombo woodland. So it's a mix of grasslands and a few different tree species, but we're moving into an area with more thorn trees than we've seen previously. And again, swinging back toward the river, the Lufira River is here. It's flowing down this direction. Right now it's flowing northward, and it's a pretty big river. Although right now it's extremely low. So we are at the end of the dry season, and this is about as low as the river will ever be all year. And so we've got some interesting navigation challenges ahead of us. But it should be really exciting as we are the first team to paddle the Lufira River. So a lot of this stuff, we're the first people to actually see it, and certainly the first scientists to study it. And we've had a nice, interesting, busy day today. We paddled the last 20 kilometers above the Mulungushi hydropower dam. And then we extracted there and drove around to the reservoir in between 2 hydropower dams. And we became the first team of scientists to have access to sample in between these dams. So it was really interesting to get the chance to go in there, put our nets in the water, sample the environmental DNA and the benthic macroinvertebrates. So fingers crossed for really good fishes tomorrow to add to our collection. And not only are we going to survey that area, but we're going to survey right here behind me in the rapids. And we're going to be using our backpack electrofisher. So we should get all sorts of interesting rapids adapted fishes. And we're entering a new biogeographic zone of the Lufira. Over the last 12 days, we've been surveying right from the source of the river to here. And from here down, we're going to enter the middle Lufira. And it's going to have a completely different assemblage of fishes, a lot of fish that I've never seen before, which is always exciting. And then we're going to enter into some national parks. So we've got Kundalungu National Park and then Upemba National Park. And so we're going to be able to survey the entirety of the middle Lufira and then a bit of the lower Lufira as well. But we are going to stop a little bit before the confluence because there are some security risks down there, including armed rebel groups that control stretches of the river. So we're going to hopefully stop before we get into the rebel territory. But it is absolutely beautiful. It's sunset right now, and you couldn't ask for a more picturesque spot to camp for the night. And I've got my tent pitched right on the edge of the bank. So if I step out quickly, I'm going to fall right into the river, which is just the way I like it. I like the waterfront camp spot.
All right. That's great, Joe. We know you definitely like that. If you look in the WhatsApp group for any of your expeditions, there's usually a few views looking out your tent and seeing the river just right there. Couldn't be closer.
Yeah. It's so special to have the opportunity to not only explore these rivers, but to kind of become a part of the river. And so what I want every morning is that first view of the river ahead. And I really enjoy that. And I strive for it whenever possible.
All right. Well, Joe, to give students and those tuning in a little taste for what you've been up to the last few weeks, I have a few photos I pulled from your WhatsApp. So I'm going to share them up here. And I think this is an important one. You with some of the team, we met some of them, but I know, none of this would be possible. None of this science in places like the DRC would be possible without your team and the people you meet along the way.
Yeah, so this is the team with the project flag. So I'm working for the Wilderness Project right now, and the Wilderness Project specializes in these river transect surveys. And we've got a really interesting and diverse team. I'm the only American, the only one who had to fly over an ocean to get here. But we've got South Africans, Zimbabweans, Zambians, and of course, a lot of people from the DRC on the team. And we've all got our own roles to play. So we've got land support, who's in charge of the logistics and getting the teams in and out safely. We've got expedition leads who are kind of making sure that everything works. And we've got our scientists. We've got not only me on the science team, but we've got 3 Congolese scientists from the University of Lubumbashi. Thankfully, they're all fish geeks as well, so we've been having a good time with that. And we've got boat captains. We've got security here, so we're working with kind of the equivalent of Congo's FBI, and they're keeping an eye on us. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got park guards as well as we're starting to enter the national parks. So a big team, a diverse team, and everybody's got a role to play within the project.
All right. Well, it's not always paddling on the river. It looks like you had to do a little bit of hiking to get in.
Yeah, so, when you start at the source of a river, it's just a little teeny tiny trickle of above ground water. The Lufira is a bit interesting in that the source area is a big peatland. So it's this big open grassland like you can see in that photo, but the water is percolating through that peat. And when it finally appears, it's in this little patch of forest, and you actually had quite a bit of water there relative to some of the other sources. But we had to hike for 3 long days through the Miombo, through the peatlands, to get to a spot where we could actually launch our canoes. And I'll tell you, I got some terrible blisters on that stretch of the trip, but my feet are all healed up now.
All right, so there's another shot going through. It looks a little drier there.
Yeah, so that's, the Miombo woodland. And this is also still on the first day of the hike. You can see we're all loaded up with everything that you might need, all the camping stuff, all the food, and of course, all the scientific equipment that we carry. And I should mention, our goal out here is not simply to explore the river. It's to study it, to understand how this river is in 2025. So we get a good baseline understanding of ecosystem health, potential impacts, conservation opportunities. So not only are we exploring the river system, but we're documenting all the biodiversity that we can, everything from birds to wildlife to fish to invertebrates and plants. We are looking at human impacts on the landscape, whether it be farming or mining or hydropower dam construction. And the goal of it is really to understand the river system. And this will be an incredibly unique data set for the Lufira. And my colleagues and I are already dreaming about all the great publications that we can produce from this work.
Yeah, and let's get out onto the river. I know this is where you like to be. So we got a few river shots. Yeah,
so that's me in the back of my canoe, and you can see actually that the river is quite green there. The Lufira River has really surprised me. Right from the source, the water chemistry honestly showed as though it was a polluted river. But I think it's just because of the underlying geology of the river. It's very high in salt. It's very basic, so very high pH. And it's also quite challenging. As you can see in that photograph, there are a lot of big trees growing along the river, and when those decide to fall down, they span the entire river, and you've either got to hack your way through them, or you've got to pull your boats up and over or around them. And in this next photo, you can actually see this is us entering into the floodplains, and you can see that the whole big river that you saw in that previous photograph has split into several channels that weave through these Phragmites reed beds, and it was really beautiful and fascinating to paddle down these little channels, but you kept hoping that you weren't going to run into any hippopotamus. And we have seen plenty of tracks of hippopotamus, and we even saw one humongous bull hippopotamus, but he decided to leave us alone, which was quite nice. And again, these beautiful channels of hippogras and Phragmites reeds, and boy, the bird biodiversity in these wetlands has been spectacular. I've never seen more birds on any of my transects than I did yesterday. We saw thousands, or maybe even tens of thousands of ducks. We saw so many birds, including some that I'd never seen before. So it was really a treat. And some of the highlights, we saw spoonbill. We saw several species of storks, marabou stork, yellow-billed stork, open-bill stork, lots of ducks, lots of kingfishers, lots of raptors. So it was fascinating and fantastic. And there was also a ton of human activity in that area, a ton of fishing pressure, a lot of fishermen, a lot of people paddling in their dugout canoes and in their plank boats. But one of the things that was really interesting in those floodplains were there were these floating villages where people had cut down a bunch of trees and built their camps floating in the middle of the floodplains. And some of those camps even served as restaurants and bars and spots for strangers to camp. So if you end up on the Lufira River, maybe you can have a campsite, a floating campsite in the middle of the floodplains.
Oh, wow, Joe, you're killing me over here. That bird life sounds absolutely incredible. Love to get out there with my camera. And I think I have some pictures of those floating villages coming up in just a moment. But I think this is a good example of what you were talking about when a tree just cuts your path off.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we had some really brutal portages. Those are not small trees. Those are big trees with hardwood. And, we've got hand saws and machetes, but it takes a long time to saw your way through those blockages. And our first several days on the river, it was almost continuous, the down trees along the river. So it was difficult, but we're through it now and shouldn't see any more for the remainder of the expedition.
I think this might be your hippo friend you were talking about.
Oh, yeah, there he is. I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of hippos. I mean, thousands of hippos, and that guy probably was the biggest I've ever seen. It was so big, so fat. It's clearly a male with a big, heavy skull, but it is unlike anything I've ever seen before. It was an absolute monster.
And then a couple more. Oh, this is some activity on the river. Is this brick making? What are they up to here?
Yeah, so that's some brick making. And what's really interesting, the reason I took this photograph was, almost all the homes here are built of bricks. But this area actually is considered one of the more polluted spots on the Lufira River. There's a lot of mining that happens on this river system. It's incredibly rich in terms of minerals. We're actually in Congo's copper belt region. But this river system actually has copper, cobalt, and even uranium mines. And so I took this photograph kind of as a way to document that people are using the sediments from the river, which are probably full of contaminants, to build their homes. They're probably living in radioactive homes alongside the banks of the river, drinking polluted water and eating polluted fish. So it's been a bit of a shock, a bit of an eye-opener, and it's certainly a major part of the story of the Lufira River.
All right. Well, there's a few more shots making our way down the river.
Yeah. It was just beautiful there in the floodplains and lots of people moving about. And you can see here a pretty heavily loaded plank boat with a couple happy paddlers. And it was just nice. Everybody is so friendly here. You greet them either in French or Swahili or one of the local dialects, or Lingala or Chibemba, and everybody smiles and waves back. So it's been really nice to engage with the community as much as we can as we move down the river.
Yeah, and speaking of the community, I've got a couple village shots coming up, and this might be the floating one too.
Oh yeah, exactly. So that is one of these floating villages. And that one was a pretty substantial one. It was also serving as a market. So you could buy your beignets there, you could buy smoked fish, you could buy your charcoal. That's what those bags are on the left side of the photo. And the highlight of this spot was they had some great tunes playing. So, we stopped there briefly, and all of us got up in our canoes and started dancing along with the community, and people just loved it. It was so fun.
I'm thinking it might have looked a little something like, let me see if I can find the right clip. I have a couple here. A little bit like this, maybe.
Well, that was a different spot, but also just an incredible feat of ingenuity. This young man had created a speaker out of a 20-liter drum, and his radio was just a few wires and a little panel. So I thought that was incredible. That was in Kapoloi Mission, where we had the opportunity to spend the night, and boy, that kid really had it going on. He's going to be a fantastic engineer one day.
That's pretty cool. Well, let's get to the fish action. So here it looks like out with the nets, electrofishing as well. Is that an electrofishing pack I see on one of the
team? That is the electrofisher. So this is one of my favorite ways to sample fish, and we had the great fortune of being able to use it all around the upper Lufira. So not just in the main stem, but also in the tributaries. And it's an incredible way to collect fish. You pretty much can catch everything that's there, and it works in areas that you can't fish with other means. So here we are. You can see that it's really rocky there, but actually we were in a set of rapids just above a waterfall. And we were able to get in and do some electrofishing there. And we added several species and genera for our expedition at that one site. And I'm sure when we sample here where we're staying at camp tomorrow morning, we're going to get a bunch of new interesting fish.
Yeah, I have a little clip here, Joe, just to highlight how challenging it is in some of these spots. You've got an above water view and then an underwater view here. Play that one more time.
Yeah, so this is actually at the Lufira source. So that is right where the water is bubbling up from the peatlands. And I was really excited because, it was pretty dark in the forest and you couldn't really see very well. So I stuck my camera into the water to see if I could find any fish. And in that video, if you had keen eyes, you can actually see that there are a couple little minnows swimming around, which I was very excited about. And we surveyed that area quite effectively, and we actually caught 8 different genera of fish, which is remarkably diverse for a source area. And I haven't done the whole tally yet, but I'm sure we're approaching 50 species on this transect alone, and that's only in the upper Lufira. From here on down, everything is going to be different from what we've seen previously. I wouldn't be surprised if we we get over 100 species on this transect.
Wow. Well, I've got a couple pictures of some fish to share before we switch over to some Q&A action. So if you are tuning in with us and you have a question for Joe, use the chat sidebar and send us in a couple questions. I see we're losing you to the darkness too, Joe. So we'll take a look at a couple fish and then we'll go to some Q&A action.
Yeah. We're a few minutes past sundown and it really gets dark quickly here. This fish is a real special fish. It's a Cheiloglanus catfish, a sucker mouth catfish. And you can see those big fleshy lips it's got. And it uses those lips to suck onto the rocks in the rapids. And you pretty much only find them in fast flowing water. So oftentimes when you catch them, they are new species for science. And this individual here is actually most likely a new species that's never been documented by scientists before. And it's a pretty small fish, but it is very exciting and, in my opinion, very beautiful. Okay, so this is a canaria. They are really weird fish. They're known as shell ears because the male develops this big growth where the ear should be, and it looks a bit like the inside of an abalone shell or a conch. And they are super diverse in this part of the upper Congo system. It's almost certain that we have several undescribed species of canaria from this expedition. We've also collected their cousins, the paracanaria. Although the paracanaria only live in the rapids and the canaria, they can't live in the rapids. So it's really interesting to see how they're kind of spatially distributed. And it has been a target of ours on this expedition, as one of my colleagues from the University of Lubumbashi is a specialist on these fish and has described several species. So hopefully these ones will get a name soon.
All right, we'll do one more here.
All right, one of my favorites. This is a Heteromormyrus taverni, and this is it's a mormyrid. It's an elephant fish or a baby whale. It's got lots of common names because they are so diverse, not just in terms of species level diversity, but morphological diversity, habitat diversity. Now, these are fascinating fish. They're considered the smartest fish in the world because they have a brain that's actually larger as compared to the body size than the brain of a human. And they use this giant brain to understand their ecosystem. And they do it in a really unique way. They're almost blind. Many species are almost blind, but they have a sixth sense. They've got an electrosense. So they produce a weak electric pulse all the time, and they use that to orient, to navigate, and to communicate with one another. So these fish are actually talking in the river and using electricity to find their prey and to find their mates. And so one of the things that we've been doing on this expedition is we've been recording their calls, much like a bird call. These are unique to each species, and they've never been recorded in this part of the world. So all of this data is new, and it's all very exciting.
All right. Well, that's pretty cool, Joe. We're going to switch gears to a little Q&A action, but we don't want to keep you too long because I know you've got to get probably camp set up, have something to eat. I'm sure you're starving. So a couple of quick questions here, Joe. The first one here is from someone tuning in who says, starting in the peat, does that mean that the river is really acidic to start? Does it last long if it is?
You know what was really surprising? So in peatlands, usually you have very acidic water, but on the Lufira, it was already very basic. We had a pH over 8.5 at the source, and it has remained very basic throughout the transect, which is an absolute shock to me. Although it is a bit similar to when we surveyed the Ogooue River in Zambia. It also flows off of the Copper Belt. It also has its source up in this highland area, quite close actually to the upper Lufira. It was also very basic. So I was really surprised by that. Usually in the peatlands, as you said, it's very acidic. Not the case here on the Lufira. And it's actually probably a really good thing because acidic conditions cause a lot of heavy metals to become mobilized in the system. So in a system that is potentially very heavily polluted, the more basic it is, the less mobile the heavy metals and pollutants are. So it might actually be a secret blessing for the Lufira River that it is so basic.
Okay. So Joe, you've mentioned obviously some fish life, the incredible bird life. What about on land? Are you seeing much wildlife?
Boy, Joe, I hate to say it, I have not seen hardly any wildlife. We saw one cane rat, which is a huge, almost rabbit-like rodent. We've seen a few water monitors and a couple monkeys. But this area certainly used to have elephants, used to have lions, used to have rhinos, giraffes. They're all gone. This is one of the more densely populated parts of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and reliance on bushmeat is very widespread. We've seen a lot of people hunting. We've seen a lot of snares and traps. One of my colleagues was actually caught in a wire snare accidentally, although he wasn't injured. So we have seen more hunting than we've seen wildlife. And I think it's going to remain like that for the remainder of the expedition, despite entering into national parks soon. I think that even inside of the national parks, poaching is a major concern. We might see more hippos, we might see some crocodiles, but we might also go the rest of the trip without seeing any more.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, that is the pressures that you find along these rivers. What would your best guess be for the population, that relies on this river, this tributary?
Hundreds of thousands of people.
Okay.
This is a really important river. There aren't that many towns, but there are villages everywhere, and the villages aren't small. There are, so many people and so many children. The reproductive rate is very high in the DRC. There are a lot of kids in each of these villages, and I often think that the impacts on these river systems are only going to grow with time. Right now, you've got, let's say, 100,000 adults using this river system. Oop, oop. I've just lost it.
You're still here. We can see the light reflected in your glasses.
I know. Let me pull out a headlamp. But in 10 or 20 years, maybe it'll be 300,000 people who are relying on this river system.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. Well, I mean, that's one of the good things about what you're doing, getting out there, seeing what's there. And then, from there, once we have baselines and we know what's there, then there is the opportunity for conservation and trying to protect some of these spots.
Yeah. No, I often think I wish we could have done this 100 years ago, because the river's already very impacted. But I'm so glad we get to do it today, because in 10 or 20 years, even the pristine parts of these rivers might be impacted. And if we didn't get the chance to do these surveys, we might never know what was out here. The fish community is still relatively intact. The bird community is still relatively intact, but the large mammals have largely disappeared from the system. But we still can get that information from the local communities. The village elders, they remember the days when they had lions in their village. They remember having elephants come through. The youth these days have never seen a lion, have never seen an elephant, other than, potentially on television.
Yeah. Well, that kind of helps answer a question that was in the chat about what the system might have been like 50, 100, 150 years ago. And it sounds like it would have been, lucky that the animal life, like the fish and the birds, are doing well, but sounds like there have been a lot more terrestrial action and probably more forest and such.
Yeah, there's been a lot of deforestation on this river, a lot of habitat conversion from, pristine, endless Mioma woodland to farmlands. There's a lot of slash and burn agriculture. One of the things that's interesting is this river's actually been used for thousands of years. Downstream, there are some really important salt deposits, which have been mined artisanally for literally thousands of years. They are important archaeological sites because they, salt is rare in these systems. So a big salt deposit where you can actually mine and produce quality salts. The salt from the Lufira River probably went throughout the Congo and into several neighboring countries. And one of the things I'm very excited is there's an endemic fish that only lives in those salt pans. So if we can get out and collect some of those fish, it'd be really interesting.
All right. Well, fingers crossed for you. So, Joe, before we let you go and get into your evening activities, what are the next couple weeks going to look like for you?
Well, we've got our hands full here. So we're putting in the inflatable boats tomorrow because we've got a couple days of rapids. So that will be interesting. Certainly a change of pace after paddling across the big hydropower reservoirs. So totally different biogeographic zone, couple days of rapids, and then we enter the buffer zone for Kundalungu National Park. And Kundalungu is this massive floodplain. It is going to be fascinating. I've heard that it's very heavily fished, that there are a lot of people, but looking at it from the satellite imagery, it looks totally unique. There are these bizarre spirals that form in the floating vegetation. And, I hypothesize that it's, due to wind action, just blowing these big floating reed mats, and then they spin and they spin and they spin, and they form these interesting spirals. But we're going to go and poke around and see if we can figure out what's actually happening there. It's a bit of a mystery at this point. So we've got probably a week, maybe 10 days getting through the middle Lufira, and then we'll reach Ogooue Falls, which separates the middle Lufira from the lower Lufira. It is one of the most impressive waterfalls in Africa. And actually, several of the largest waterfalls in Africa are in the Lufira system on its tributaries. So we should have some beautiful, spectacular waterfalls, a lot of change in elevation. And then entering the lower Lufira, we've got a gorge with some nasty looking rapids. And we're going to end at a place called Somwe, where there's a proposed hydropower dam. So it's going to be really important for us to collect the data around the hydropower dam to get a baseline of what's there, or, what was there before the dam was built. It is going to flood the entirety of the lower Lufira all the way to Ogooue Falls. There are lots of endemic species, lots of interesting fishes there. So we need to get the good baseline now because tomorrow might be too late.
Yeah. Well, Joe, thank you so much for being with us today. Excuse me. First of all, it's great to see you. Always love hosting you from places all over the world, although it's kind of fun to do tide pools from time to time as well. But definitely being out in the wilds of Africa is pretty cool. And yeah, thanks for being our first live connection from the DRC. That's pretty special. That brings us to 116 countries we've beamed live from with scientists and explorers and conservationists from all over the world. So I'm sure you have a couple firsts up there as well, but DRC, that's pretty cool. And yeah, to you and your team, good luck out on the river. Sounds like there's plenty more adventure to pack in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. It's really great to connect and to be able to share a bit of the experience with your platform, with the followers, with the students, and with anybody else who's tuning in live. So I really appreciate it. And, maybe we can sneak in another call sometime later downstream when I've got more to report, and certainly more and more fish to share.
All right. Well, we'll keep our eyes and ears out for that, Joe, but have fun, stay safe out there, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.